Today, we're going to be talking about an opportunity that I missed out on as a new investor. I was so focused on this one metric that I ignored everything else. Welcome to Be a Better Landlord. My name is Ashley Kehr. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you're not already, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform for Be a Better Landlord. Today, we're going to talk about cash flow and how that is not the only measurement tool that you should use to see if a property is a good deal or a bad deal. I spent a lot of time just thinking cash flow is how I'm going to gain financial freedom. Cash flow is how I'm going to build wealth for my family. Cash flow is how I'm going to quit my W 2 job. Yes, those things can be done with cash flow, but there were so many other aspects and advantages of real estate investing that I was missing out on and I did not account for as an investor. There are so many other benefits to real estate investing besides just cash flow. And that can be appreciation, that can be mortgage paid down by your tenants, that can be tax advantages. And we're going to go through the list of them so that when you're analyzing a deal, you're looking at a property, you're looking at the full picture and not just what the cash flow is. Here's where my problem was. I was looking at purely cash flow and I didn't consider these other metrics. Plus, I didn't understand the property as a whole and what I was getting into. So I was looking at cash flow, and that meant I was looking at properties that were in C class neighborhoods. They cash flowed a lot, but they needed a lot of capex. There was a lot of turnover. There was a lot of vacancy. And I ended up selling these properties because I called them the headache properties. Even though they cash flowed, if you wrote it on paper, in the long run, they were not generating wealth. These areas did not see any type of appreciation, very, very little. And it was just because of the market at the time. But overall, they were not appreciating properties. I also had a lot of turnover at these properties. So there was a lot of vacancy. There was a lower quality of tenant in these areas where they were not caring for the property, keeping it clean, and there was a lot of money I had to put into the actual turnover costs. So on paper, I accounted for 8 to 10% for vacancy, 8 to 10% for capital improvements, 8 to 10% for repairs and maintenance, those variable expenses. But when it came down to it, these headache properties needed a lot more of my time, needed my involvement for tenant disputes. They needed my involvement to figure out what we needed to do in between each turnover, to do the showings for each turnover, to get the property listed, all these different things. So my time was no longer worth it for the cash flow that I was getting. I realized I'd rather a property that had other benefits plus gave me some cash flow, but I didn't have to spend as much time on the properties. So let's just go through the list of things that you may be ignoring if you're purely looking for cash flow. The first one is poor appreciating markets. You are missing out on a big wealth generator. That is appreciation and mortgage paydown. So over time, your property is going to build up this equity. So I've been investing over 10 years and it took me a while to realize this, but one day I looked back and I was like, wow, I have a lot of equity in that property that I bought back in 2013, even 2017, that has just been appreciating and has been from the tenants paying down the mortgage and building that equity in the property. So that's one thing you could be ignoring that can be a real wealth generator is if you're going to buy and hold this property for a long time, make sure you're looking at what that opportunity is for that property too. The next thing is deferred maintenance and CapEx, and how those can really just be time bombs just waiting to explode. And you have this huge, huge cost that needs to be added to your property. For example, I bought this property that had tenants living in it. It was functional, it was okay, but it was not cost effective to go in and to completely renovate the property down to the studs because I just could not get the rent that would make sense for me to go in and spend all that money on the improvements. So these were cosmetic updates on these properties, and they consistently had problems because the root of the problem was never addressed. And that was my problem. I ran the numbers on it being okay. It was cosmetically updated, but the root of the problem was never addressed. And I had to continuously go in and make these big repairs, expensive repairs to keep filling the hole, filling the void, and not actually having the resources to go in and just completely renovate it because it just wouldn't have made sense. So instead, I sold the properties. The next thing is the low quality tenant pool. When you're investing in areas that maybe have a higher crime, not as great of school districts, you're going to most likely get a lower quality tenant, someone who's not going to care as much for the property. Sometimes it can be people who move more frequently. They don't have the money to pay a premium if you are going to upgrade the property. So really take that into consideration when looking at your properties. Okay, now let's move on to the benefits that are often overlooked. Like I said, appreciation. This is a big one. This is where you can be the real wealth generator. So if you are going to hold a property for a long time, look at markets and look at the history of the property to look at, has it appreciated already? Does it have a steady trend of appreciating over the past 10, 20 years? In general, if you look at a map of the last 50 years, real estate has its ups and downs, but overall, in that time period, real estate has gone up. So if you're planning to hold the property for long term, appreciation is something you should really, really be considering and looking at. You can also tap into that equity that you're building for HELOCs or do a refinance, a cash out refinance, tap into that money besides just not selling the property or use it for a 1031 exchange. The next thing is a principal paydown. So this is just your tenant is paying down your mortgage for you. So every month, whatever your principal payment is that you are making to the bank, the tenant is paying that much extra to you really every single month because that is equity that you're gaining in the property. The next thing are the tax advantages. And I ignored this for a long time. It's like, oh, I get my write offs, my expenses that I'm putting into my property. But I also didn't look at a lot of the other major tax advantages that you can have for the property. So, for example, doing a cost segregation study on the property for short term rental, long term rental, and being able to deduct more of the property in year one to offset some of your income. This is amazing and great if you have W-2 income and you're able to write off it. If you have real estate professional status, you can take these write offs even farther. There's a short-term rental loophole for you if you can't get real estate professional status. So there's so many benefits. And there's a really good book out there called Tax Strategies for Savvy Real Estate Investors. It's by Amanda Hahn and Matt McFarland. I'll go through all the different benefits that you can find as a real estate investor and you should be taking advantage of. Another one is a 1031 exchange where your gain from the sale of the property, your profit, isn't taxed. Eventually, it will be. It's just deferred. It's not that you're eliminating paying taxes. What we can do is you can sell your property, take the proceeds from the sale of that property, and invest it into another like kind property. So you could go from owning a duplex, sell that property, use the gain for a down payment on a 10 unit, and now you're scaling and growing your property by doing a 1031 exchange to kind of scale up and you're not paying any taxes on that gain because you're investing it into another property that is similar in nature. Better quality tenants can equal less headaches and more time. So, why did you get into real estate investing? I'm assuming it wasn't because you wanted to work 80 hours a week and you wanted to deal with complaints and you wanted to deal with headaches. Most often, when you are in a higher class neighborhood, you are going to have better quality tenants. I really am comfortable investing in B class areas. That's where most of my neighborhoods. It's not luxury, it's not super high end, but it's also not the lower end too, where there tends to be more crime and things like that going on in lower income areas. So this can also lead to less turnover too. I like being in that B class area, especially if we do hit, a recession, those luxury A class areas, people could potentially not afford them and you're going to have more vacancy in that area. So I think really looking at a balanced framework going forward as to taking in all of these metrics. There's so many rules as to, oh, the 1% rule, the 50% rule, all these different things, but not one metric should be used to analyze a deal. Make sure you're looking at the whole picture of the property and the deal. Make sure that it suits your investing needs and what you want to get out of real estate investing. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Ashley Kehr with Be a Better Landlord. Make sure you check out TurboTenant if you need property management software to automate and to take the manual work out of being a landlord.